Hi, everyone. It is April 5, 2021. I have a lot to go over. This video may be in several parts, but I want you to listen to this right here.
Critical race theory and the left's war on whites. Is there any clearer sign of how privileged a society is than the disproportionate amount of time that society spends guilting citizens over how privileged they are? In America 2021, our children are being indoctrinated from kindergarten through college to hate the historic American nation, its founders, and the majority race in this country. They're being taught by anti-white, anti-American bullies that we are all just nothing more than the miserable sum of our politicized racial and ethnic identities. Instead of celebrating the privilege of American citizenship, minorities are steeped in grievance, victimhood, and contempt, while woke white liberals are hurling themselves under the bus to prove their so-called virtue. Check this out. In Minnesota, a dinner theater canceled its production of a Cinderella show because it was, quote, too white. Or how about this? You remember that 2020 Democratic presidential candidate and self-help guru Marianne Williamson? Well, she leads white followers in a prayer of apology to black people.
I'm going to ask the white Americans in the room to please repeat after me. To you and all African Americans. From the beginning of our nation's history, in honor of your ancestors and on behalf of your children, please hear this from my heart. I apologize.
This self-loathing culture is everywhere. It started on college campuses. It spread to the federal government, the military, and of course, Hollywood is spoon-feeding it to your kids. You can't even watch cartoons anymore without getting lectured about the evils of white privilege by Looney Tunes social justice warriors.
Thanks to systemic racism, most of your storytellers prioritize white accomplishments, which leaves you with an incomplete picture. Ask yourself as you're learning history, who's telling the story? Was this modified to make white readers comfortable? Are major details being left out that would credit people of color and center their point of view?
History is racist. Immigration laws are racist. Voting reform laws are racist. Math is racist. And get this, objective academic standards are racist, according to this Arizona State University professor who pushed his campus to adopt a more socially just grading system that rewards mere effort over actual achievement.
What is the best way to describe labor-based grading contracts?
Labor-based grading contracts are a set of agreements that are negotiated with students in a classroom to determine the labor required to get a particular grade that the class has agreed upon. Standards, because of where they come from, are white supremacist. And there's no way around it because of who created them, who are in control, who controlled those standards, and who controlled those classrooms, and who doesn't get to make those decisions, and where those language practices come from. So this is a way of making the classroom much more socially just by rearranging its assessment ecology, the grading mechanisms of the class.
Okay, the good news is that parents are fighting back and speaking out, like these moms in Arizona.
I'm the mother of a high school senior and an 8th grade son, and my fear is this type of curriculum will actually breed more racism and more divide in our country rather than unity. It saddened me how I have witnessed my own children lose friendships because their friends make assumptions about them. They tell them they are privileged because they're white, or they are bad people because their dad is a police officer.
When you peel back the layers of this onion, you will see that it promotes taking from one group in order to compensate a second group, to correct injustices caused by a third group who mistreated a fourth group by an earlier point in history. It's absurd. Not only does it not promote justice, it does the opposite. It promotes racism. And you cannot cure racism with more racism.
That's for sure. And bravo to this mom in Nevada Gabriella Clarke, who's suing her charter school over discriminatory critical race theory teaching that pressured her mixed-race son to confess his quote-unquote white dominance.
Stick up for your children and do not let them trample all over your rights. Reach out, just like I did, to anybody who will listen.
And parents in Loudoun County, Virginia, they were targeted and doxxed by school board members for organizing against critical race theory lessons like this one, in which a teacher bullied a student for not seeing everything through a racial lens.
The story behind this picture, I'd rather hold on to that. Just tell me what this seems to be a picture of.
It's just two people chilling.
Right, just two people. There's nothing more to this picture?
Nah, not really. Just two people chilling.
I don't believe that you believe that. I don't believe that you look at this as just two people. I don't think
truly
you
is just two people, though, is it not?
Yeah, but I think you're being intentionally coy about what this is a picture of.
What would I be being coy about? It's two people standing back to back in a picture.
Yeah, and that's all you see is two people.
I'm confused on what you would like me to speak on in that sense.
I don't think you are. I don't know why you do this.
Wow. You know what the biggest insult added to all this collective injury and stupidity is? You're subsidizing it. The anti-white propaganda racket is a multi-billion-dollar industry, not just in higher education, but in K through 12 schools. In Idaho, state legislators have identified some $18 million in the public education budget that supports critical race theory.
This is a cancer growing in our education system from zero to higher education. There's a book list that is on our Idaho website. And let me read to you a few of these. A picture book that invites white children and parents to become curious about racism, accept that it's real, and cultivate justice. They have Being Misgendered, 10,000 Dresses, Liana's Lunchbox, a Ramadan story, but no books on Christianity anywhere in the list. A is for activism. So this one is written for the next generation of progressives, families who want their kids to grow up in a space that is unapologetic about activism, environmental justice, civil rights, LGBTQ rights, and everything else that activists believe in and fight for. So that's just some of the content that they are recommending to for teaching our 0 to 5-year-olds.
A healthy and functioning sovereign nation would teach its children to be grateful for their privileges, not ashamed of them. Until a unified movement of parents, teachers, educators, and elected officials band together to defund and deplatform anti-white denigration, we will remain on a path towards civilizational suicide.
You just watched.
And we're on that path. We are on that path. Russia warns of anti-white aggression in the United States. Well, that warning comes from what is happening here in the United States. We're so stupid following our politicians. Charles Barkley unleashes 1 minute of truth. Wow. So let's listen to Charles Barkley.
Shared that news, how painful it was.
Yeah, but the one thing I took out of that piece was, man, I think most white people and black people are great people. I really believe that in my heart. But I think our system is set up where our politicians, whether they're Republicans or Democrats, are designed to make us not like each other so they can keep their grasp of money and power. They divide and conquer. I truly believe in my heart most white people and black people are awesome people, but we're so stupid following our politicians, whether they're Republicans or Democrats. And their only job is, hey, let's make these people not like each other. We don't live in their neighborhoods. We all got money. Let's make the whites and blacks not like each other. Let's make rich people and poor people not like each other. Let's scramble the middle class. I truly believe that in my heart.
And so do I. And there's a lot of evidence to prove what Charles Barkley just said. This country has gone so far over the edge in terms of the race, the racism. Now, I think most people are not buying any of it. Black, white, Hispanic, whatever. Americans are just, most are not buying into this. Unfortunately, corporations, mainstream media, politicians, wow, they are nonstop in trying to get this race war. Now, I read this article. Well, some of the article. A black army rises to fight the racist right. A man calling himself Grandmaster J has raised a disciplined, heavily armed militia. It has yet to fire a shot at its enemies, but it's prepared for war. I'm not going to read any of this, but coalition, no effing around coalition. Because I'm not going to read it, I will link below to it, and I've posted videos on this last year. They came out supporting Breonna Taylor. You know, it's Breonna Taylor. It's just tragic that she lost her life. Her boyfriend was shooting at cops. Okay. Nobody really wants to dig into the details in these events. They use them to carry forward their agendas. And unfortunately, we now have a mainstream media and politicians with an agenda, and they're carrying this race agenda for the purpose of getting a race war started. So I want you to listen to, this is Morning Joe, MSNBC. They're reporting on this all-black militia group.
Now to the concerns of another community that too often feels unprotected, and the group that's stepping up to do something about it. They're known as the NFAC, an unarmed all-black militia.
Unarmed. It's an unarmed. Wow.
You might have seen an armed black militia that you might have seen at protests in Georgia, Kentucky, and D.C. Joining us now from Atlanta.
What kind of reporting was that? Okay, an unarmed black militia. You might have seen a black militia that was armed in Kentucky and those other states. She's suggesting that these are two different black militias one armed, one unarmed? This is what Americans are listening to, and they don't question it? Unbelievable.
That's stepping up to do something about it. They're known as the NFAC, an unarmed all-black militia. You might have seen an armed black militia that you might have seen at protests in Georgia, Kentucky, and D.C. Joining us now from Atlanta with more on this, NBC News correspondent Morgan Radford. Morgan, tell us about this group.
Mika, good morning. The bottom line is this group says that the U.S. government as well as law enforcement simply does not do enough to protect black Americans in this country, which is why they say they're taking matters into their own hands. And interestingly, Mika, this is a group that is growing. They say they now boast recruits in nearly every single state. So we decided to go and embed with them and see exactly what they're doing and why. Take a listen.
The sounds of war. Right here at home. This is the NFAC, an all-black militia with a mission to defend the black community by any means necessary.
So this is training for one of the new chapters.
Yes. Appearing by the hundreds at protests from Stone Mountain, Georgia to Louisville, Kentucky, demanding justice for police killings and countering what they believe is the threat of right-wing militias. It's a movement started in 2017 by this man, former musician and Army veteran John Grandmaster J. Johnson.
Is the movement growing?
By leaps and bounds.
We met with him outside of Cincinnati, where he says another new chapter is now in the works.
The NFAC stands for the Not Effing Around Coalition.
What's behind the name?
The NFAC was born out of the last 4 years under the Trump administration. The deterioration of racial relations in this country. It means that you're preparing yourselves to defend yourselves.
While the group style echoes the Black Panther Party of the 1960s, their goals are distinct, focusing on defense with the ultimate goal of a black ethno-state.
What makes us so different is that our goal is our own government, our own country, a place where we can determine our own future.
Is violence an option to reach your goals?
The United States was built on violence being an option. Violence should be the last option.
Extremism experts say the group is distinct from far-right militias.
They have not risen to the level of concern of, say, the 3%ers, the Oath Keepers. They have not engaged in violence. In fact, in most of their demonstrations, they have, in fact, coordinated their activities with police.
When you talk about January 6th, and we saw those rioters storm the Capitol, what do you say to critics who say you're no different from them? They're extremists, you're extremists.
Show me where we have done those things. They've killed people. They've disrespected the government to the point where they have invaded its sacred halls. Show me where we've done those things, because we have done none of them.
We were allowed rare access to one of their training sites at a secret location in rural Georgia.
We are now driving to the NFAC training facility.
We spoke to one member who chose to go by the code name Shy to protect her anonymity.
This one is the handgun.
Correct, yes.
And then what do you guys do next?
We are going to the area where we practice our primary weapons firing.
Why did you decide to join this movement?
It's for the cause. Black people, we need to learn how to defend ourselves. This is definitely one way to do it.
Do you all, have normal jobs? You work in all different sectors? And
Absolutely. We're business owners, we're doctors, lawyers, we're your everyday person, anywhere from Walmart to the corporate sector.
What are you all training for?
We're training for self-defense.
A response to show they won't be scared or unprotected any longer.
Mika, we asked the group several times to give us an exact number of their membership. They refused to do so, but it appears to be in the thousands based on the number of people who have come to their marches and also based on the number of people who saw at one individual training session. But it's also important to note, Mika, that the NFAC has no record of violent incidents. However, their leader, Grandmaster Jay, has been recently indicted on federal charges by federal officials who allege that he pointed a rifle at officers during that demonstration in support of Breonna Taylor in Louisville, Kentucky last September.
Do you see how they present this militia versus the 3% and the other militias that, well, are not exclusively white, but primarily white. Okay. Mainstream media promoting this race war. And this is what happens when you have lie after lie after lie. I mean, you should be afraid of the 3%ers who want to protect the Constitution. And don't be afraid of the black militia no effing around, right? They just want to defend themselves. But white militias, okay, they are dangerous, and you should be scared of them. Now, the whole D.C. Insurrection is based on lies. And anybody, all you need to do is a little bit of research to find that out. But that's what, is discussed here, right? And the leader of this black militia is saying, we didn't disrespect government. We didn't, they killed people. That is not true. The only person who was shot at and died was, unfortunately, someone who died because it was law enforcement that killed her. Evidence has shown that, we didn't find arms amongst those Trump supporters. Okay. They did it up for years of listening to how Trump was a Nazi, he was Hitler, and, Trump supporters are Nazis and white supremacists, and, mainstream media just banging on that tune, going, and it's still going. Every American should be concerned. Every American. And not just white Americans, black Americans. They don't get on mainstream media. There are so many black Americans who are so opposed to all of mainstream media, their official narrative, the politicians going at it. But when you control the media is quite the weapon, and the left controls the media. So this is not going to stop. What Charles Barkley said about politicians, just, going at it to get us to hate one another. Well, if you're so caught up in this mainstream media narrative, then you may hate the other, race. But when you see what they're doing, you don't, because you know that it's an agenda. And you work hard not to hate mainstream media. And they're just despicable, all of these people. San Francisco to defund police by $120 million and redistribute those funds to black minorities. Oh, well, what about the white residents of San Francisco? What about Hispanic residents of San Francisco? This would piss people off. And Charles Barkley last year blasted fools pushing defund the police. Who were black people supposed to call? Ghostbusters? I mean, oh, wow, man.
To really be careful when we, I hear these fools on TV talking about defund the police and things like that. We need police reform and prison reform and things like that. Because you know who ain't going to defund the cops? White neighborhoods and rich neighborhoods. So that notion they keep saying that, I'm like, wait a minute, we just going to leave, who are black people supposed to call? Ghostbusters? When we have crime in our neighborhoods, We need police reform. But like I say, white people, especially rich white people, they're always going to have cops. So we need to stop that defund or abolish the cops crap. And we started this to really be careful when we...
And it's not just white people, white neighborhoods. The rich will always have protection. Now, they're not starting a class war because that's where the divide really exists. So that's why they push the race war. Get the races hating one another so that's what they do. They just fight one another instead of looking at the real enemies. Our government and the very, very wealthy who are also pushing this divide. So the wealthy will always be protected. The non-wealthy, white, black, Hispanic, all races will not be. We'll be fighting one another and the police will not come. Seattle to force all white city employees to admit they are racists. Really? Okay. I think a lot of you know about this, but I'm just going to read the headlines. The Holier Than Thou crusade in San Francisco. The city's move to rename schools. The tearing down of our history. And unfortunately, an awful lot of people do not understand that what we have now, these the culture war, the race wars, all of it is brought in by communists, by Marxists, to bring in communism. And as, you know, for the uneducated, and I don't mean those who have not gone through formal education or higher education, those who don't have those degrees on the wall. I am talking about all, whether you graduated from high school or you graduated with a doctorate, uneducated about what is taking place in our country. And an awful lot of those who do have those higher education, the degrees, are really actually, well, they're cemented in a refusal because they think that they're so smart that they don't have to do any kind of research. You don't have to tell me what's going on. I know what's going on. I'm smart. Look at my degrees. I graduated from, so I'm smart. No, you're really not. They're not looking into what's going on. So the tearing down of statues, the renaming of schools and universities and institutions, it's still going on, guys. Oakland to give low-income residents $500 a month. No strings attached? Oh, there is a string. As long as you're non-white. No white people will get this. Only non-white people. Do you think that maybe this is going to cause a little bit of anger? You know, all of this is really, it's very upsetting because those who are championing, cheerleading, advocating for the critical race theory in school, all of the people who are going, you know, they're on the bandwagon and, you know, we're protecting ourselves now from the white supremacists who are in our country. They're all pulling us backwards. They're all pulling us backwards. You know, the one thing that I can say about this country that's really good is that, God, in terms of race, we made terrific strides. And all of this, the lie that they're promoting nonstop, is pulling us backwards. And I can't stand it. You know, so yeah, Seattle forces the white city employees to admit they are racist. You want to keep your job? Admit that you are a racist. That's what's happening. That's what's happening. 500 goes to everyone but white people. Great policies. The whitest privilege. San Diego School District tells teachers, you are racist. You want to keep your job? You got to go through the training, and you got to admit you're a racist, even when you're not. Biden describes filibuster as a Jim Crow relic, constantly bringing up the past, the worst of our past in terms of race. But it's gone, and they're bringing it back. But it's not the truth. And so many people, because they have their own personal agenda, they carry that. They want it. It works for them. Those individuals, you know, Black Lives Matter, but this is an agenda. And if Americans can't see this now, it's unbelievable. By the way, YouTube deletes 2.5 million dislikes from Biden White House videos. This guy gets so many dislikes. You know, it's really pretty. Here, you want to see? Okay. Press briefing, Psaki. Dislikes 1,256, likes 187. President Biden delivers remarks on the tradition of Easter. Dislikes 1,651, likes 270. But you go back a little bit further, I think most people are just not even watching. A weekly conversation, Americans ask the White House about the American Jobs Plan. Dislikes 7,048, likes 508. Delivers remarks on the March jobs report. Likes 350, dislikes 2,313. Good reason why they're deleting a whole lot of dislikes. Because this guy, the White House channel gets an awful lot of dislikes. Press secretary, 2,329 dislikes, 329 likes. But YouTube and Google and Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, leftists control them. Leftists. They're for the Democrats. So is mainstream media. And it's high time Democrats look into it. But they won't if they don't care about the truth. So that's our big problem. Okay, Obama-era CIA chief Brennan. He's increasingly embarrassed to be a white male. Really. Something he has no control over, but he's embarrassed to be a white male. There are so few Republicans in Congress who value truth, honesty, and integrity. That's right, and you do, and Joe Biden does. It's Republicans. Wow. Divide and conquer. Divide and conquer. San Diego County employee training declares racism is a white problem. Divisive and offensive race theory training forced on San Diego County healthcare workers. Colorado declares racism a public health crisis. CDC moved forward on critical race theory training despite Trump executive order. I thought the CDC was an agency of the federal government. No. It's a for-profit organization. Biden infrastructure bill includes $20 billion to destroy highways for being racist. No joke. Everything comes down to race now, even the infrastructure bill. Here, Pete Beauty Kig, whatever the hell his name is. Okay. He is the Secretary of Transportation. He's Mr. Transportation. Black and brown neighborhoods have been disproportionately divided by highway projects or left isolated by the lack of adequate transit and transportation resources. The Biden and Harris administration, well, we will make righting these wrongs an imperative. Everything is race. Everything is race, and it's sickening to listen to this. But, this is a guy, okay? Ready for this? This is Pete, who's also a big climate changer, right? Climate change. We've got to do something about climate change. All right, this is Pete being dropped off in an SUV that, well, that's a polluter and that is causing climate change. But he's dropped off a short distance from his destination. Dropped off, and he's getting on a bicycle. When he goes into public, he's riding a bicycle. Really? Okay, let's show the public that I ride a bicycle. These people are such despicable hypocrites, my God. And oh, the wealth of Pete. He will always be protected. Hypocrisy? Senator Tammy Duckworth to speak at George Washington University after legitimizing movement to cancel George Washington, the name. Seems like a good time to remind everyone that West Point Military Academy is teaching critical race theory as part of its leadership program. Do you not know about critical race theory? Essentially teaching West Point cadets along with K through, no, not just 12, universities. Critical race theory. White people are oppressors. Non-white people are victims of white people. Whites have privilege, everybody else doesn't. It is setting up and cementing in the brains of the young that we have a real race problem here. And these are the young who didn't grow up, like the baby boomers, didn't grow up with the civil rights movement. They didn't grow up with what was going on, during and before and the Jim Crow era. They didn't grow up with any of that. They don't have any idea what this country was just 50 years ago. And when we see what is really amazing, they claim that the United States has systemic racism. White supremacists hold down black people. Have you noticed how many very successful black Americans there are? In fact, we have mainstream media. A whole lot report on how we are systemically racist. Then how did you get your job? How could it have been possible if we didn't come so far that a large majority of Americans voted for a black president? How is that possible? How is it possible that we have so many black Americans in high positions in government, attorney generals? How is it possible that they achieved everything that they've achieved if white people are keeping black people down? Okay. Schools now undergoing diversity audits to ensure teachers are woke enough. Teachers are being audited to make sure that they are teaching critical race theory and they're woke. Okay? Now, sorry to say this. I understand that not a lot of people have courage. But people have to find their courage to stand up and stand against what is happening, because it will hurt all of us, as it already has. But it's going to get worse and worse and worse. So you're teaching because you want a paycheck, and you have to remain silent. I'm sorry, but at this point, you are part of what's taking place. At some point in every adult's life, they have to come to that crossroads and make a conscious decision. Am I going to do what's right, or am I going to continue doing what's wrong and justifying it every step of the way? Black people are being called apologists for white supremacy. I want you to listen to Dr. Carol Swain, who has been a highly respected professor of political science, an author of many books, and race relations was also part of her career. You will not hear from anyone who has spent their entire career, in race relations, or authors of like Shelby Steele. You will not hear from these Black Americans on mainstream media because they're not going. They are not manipulated by the official narrative.
Falsely applied. Where do you go to get your reputation back? My next guest is an expert on both white supremacist groups and those who falsely use that label to slander political opponents. She's led an inspiring life, overcoming poverty, teenage motherhood, and divorce, dropping out of high school in the 9th grade, but later going on to earn a doctorate and was professor at Vanderbilt University. She's author of a Pulitzer Prize-nominated book, and her latest book is called Abduction: How Liberalism Steals the Hearts and Minds of Our Children. I'm very honored to have Dr. Carol Swain with us. Carol, good to see you. I am convinced you are hitting a nerve in things that you write, things that you say, because you have been labeled, and I find this amazing, an apologist for white supremacists. Now, looking at you, I'm not seeing where that fits.
Well, it doesn't fit. And I was probably one of the first victims of the Southern Poverty Law Center. Back in 2009, I published a blog criticizing them and pointing out that they were engaging in mission creep. Mission creep is when an organization loses sight of its original purpose and it goes off into other areas. Well, the Southern Poverty Law Center, back in 2009, they had started attacking immigration restrictionists, labeling them as haters. And at that point, I knew that something was wrong. I wrote my blog, and 6 weeks later, I was on the cover of the Tennessean, and the Southern Poverty Law Center, a representative was quoted calling me an apologist for white supremacy. And at the time, it changed my life in that I did not have the platform I have today, and I was being attacked all across the country, and that did not subside until the Wall Street Journal published an article in defense of Carol Swain.
Well, it's got to be frustrating, though, as an African-American woman, to be called an apologist for white supremacists, for heaven's sakes. I mean, I don't even know where they could come of that, but the Southern Poverty Law Center may be one of the biggest frauds in America today. Why is it that the national media consider them some authoritative organization? Because they're always using their labels, calling people hate groups that are anything but hate groups.
Because when they were founded back in 1971, they started off with a noble cause. They were after the Klan, the neo-Nazis. There's no one in here sympathetic to those groups.
No, no one.
Right, and so at that time, they were doing something that was important, but there's not many Klansmen left in America or neo-Nazis. And so at some point, they started going after mainstream organizations, tarring individuals, smearing them with the hate label, and more recently, they have gone after churches, they have gone after conservative organizations, and so they label anyone who is not liberal as haters and extremists, and they give leftist organizations a free pass. And so you won't find Black Lives Matters or Antifa or the Muslim Brotherhood, any of those organizations listed as hate organizations.
But you see the Family Research Council, which is anything but. You and I both know Tony Perkins and Jerry Boykin and people who are there. And a few years ago, because the Southern Poverty Law Center designated them a hate group, which was absurd, there was a person who was inspired by that to go into the lobby of Family Research Council and start shooting. And had it not been for the intervention of the security guard, he would have killed everyone in the building. He said that was his stated goal.
And the shooter, the man that shot Representative Scalise, and he targeted Republican members of Congress, he was a social media fan of the Southern Poverty Law Center. And so they do inspire hate when they label organizations as hate groups and when they smear individuals. And more recently, there was a young woman who works for Campus Reform, early 20s. She was listed in Hate Watch because she gave an interview to Tony Perkins about socialism. It had nothing to do with LBGT issues, but because they have labeled the Family Research Council as a hate group, she gave an interview to the Family Research Council. They labeled her as a hater.
Are we in danger of losing the simple concept of free speech on our university campuses?
We've lost it at most universities, and not just the secular ones, the Christian ones also. And going back to the Southern Poverty Law Center, it's very serious that members of Congress call them to testify. And so they're actually shaping the laws that govern us, even though they have no objective scientific standard for who or what gets labeled as a hate group or as an extremist. And so this is very dangerous for America, that they would have that kind of influence, and the journalists who cite them are too lazy to do research.
Well, Carol, I hope people will realize that there is a different perspective, and it comes from Carol Swain in a book called Abduction, How Liberalism Steals Our Children's Hearts and Minds.
And yes, they are stealing the hearts and minds, the critical thinking, the creativity, the individuality of children. And that is tragic. It's abuse. And the only way that it will ever stop is if all Americans unite and stop it. You know, what if racism is a disorder and the majority of the white population does have it? They're dealing with a mental illness, and they don't even know it. Post-traumatic slave master disorder. Church of Chicago, Renewal Church of Chicago. This is what they're preaching. Now, I'm just going to go through, I'm just going to continue. Tom Brady called racist for winning Super Bowl during Black History Month. Really? Okay. A Philadelphia elementary school recently forced fifth grade students to celebrate Black communism and simulate a Black Power rally in honor of political radical Angela Davis. Fifth graders? The principal of East Side Community School in New York sent white parents this tool for action, quote unquote, which tells them they must become white traitors and then advocate for full white abolition. The 8 white identities: white supremacist, white voyeurism, white privilege, white benefit, white confessional, white critical, white traitor, white abolitionist. Okay. Seattle BLM activist charged with hate crime after harassing multiple Asian Americans. Well, but how is that possible? Because, well, it has been and stated as a fact, Black people are not racist. Only white people are racists. So how could he be charged with a hate crime? Have they even read the new Georgia election law? So I posted a video. This election law. Oh, so Biden comes out and claims that Georgia is bringing back Jim Crow. No, wait. The election law was Jim Crow on steroids. On steroids. And you have all of these corporations who are no longer going to donate to the politicians that voted for this bill. This bill? Okay. Have they even read it? Well, they did, but they don't care. It's an agenda, so they lie about it. And Joe Biden, even the Washington Post had to admit, gave him 4 Pinocchios, which means you're lying about the fact that that bill says that those who are standing on line to vote, you can't give them water? Water? Really? This bill essentially is you need a photo ID to vote. That's Jim Crow on steroids. The bill wasn't black people need a vote. Black residents of Georgia don't have to have a photo ID, and white people don't need. No, it's not race, but they're making it race. Everything is race because they are so gunning for that race war. Big time. Big time. Vanderbilt professor says Republicans would deny water to Jesus dying on the cross. That's right. The bill passed in Georgia inspired that statement. It's unbelievable what's taking place. CBS attempts to controversialize Florida Governor Ron DeSantis for doing exceptional job with COVID response. Well, DeSantis came out and first wrote an executive order prohibiting vaccine passports. Goes against the agenda. But he also came out and said, critical race theory, there's no place for it here in Florida. So they're going after Ron DeSantis because you can't disagree. If you disagree, you get canceled. That's where we are here in this country. That should alarm everyone. Even the Girl Scouts. Girl Scouts announce $500,000 for anti-racist programming. Minnesota's new social studies curriculum would racialize first graders, teach high schoolers about the evils of whiteness, capitalism, and Christianity. You can read these articles. These headlines are not clickbait. This is real. Wisconsin parents on new social studies curriculum. Our children cannot escape leftist messaging, which means all parents need to band together, get it out, get the leftist messaging out of public schools. If you can't do that, you've got to protect your kids and somehow get together with other parents so that you can figure out a way to do homeschooling, because public school now is destroying your children. Black, white, Hispanic, all races, Asian, they're all being destroyed. You know, I want you to listen to this. This is a woman, an MP in the British Parliament. And isn't it interesting that critical race theory is not just here in the United States, but seems to have taken over all Western countries because it's a global agenda.
What we are against is the teaching of contested political ideas as if they are accepted facts. We don't do this with communism, we don't do this with socialism, we don't do it with capitalism. And I want to speak about a dangerous trend in race relations that has come far too close to home to my life, and it is the promotion of critical race theory, an ideology that sees my blackness as victimhood and their whiteness as oppression. I want to be absolutely clear. This government stands unequivocally against critical race theory. Some schools have decided to openly support the anti-capitalist Black Lives Matter group, often fully aware that they have a statutory duty to be politically impartial. Black lives do matter, of course they do. But we know that the Black Lives Matter movement, capital BLM, is political. I know this because at the height of the protest, I've been told of white Black Lives Matter protesters calling, and I'm afraid I apologize for saying this word, calling a black armed police officer guarding Downing Street a pet nigger. That is why we do not endorse that movement on this side of the House. It is a political movement, and what would be nice would be for members on the opposite side to condemn many of the actions that we see this political movement instead of pretending that it is a completely wholesome anti-racist organization. There is a lot of pernicious stuff that is being pushed, and we stand against that. We do not want to see teachers teaching their white pupils about white privilege and inherited racial guilt. And let me be clear, any school which teaches these elements of critical race theory as fact, or which promotes partisan political views such as defunding the police without offering a balanced treatment of opposing views, is breaking the law.
Breaking the law. You know, this critical race theory, it is so discriminatory. It is so, well, the only thing that you can really call it is evil, because it is setting these children up. And I've received comments from parents who have biracial children, and they're sitting in class, and they might be white and black, half white, half black. They have one black parent, one white parent, and they're being forced, if they look more white, they're being forced to admit that they're an oppressor. If they look more black, then they're a victim of their white peers. This is insane. This is abuse. And how any parent can not see that is really frightening. So DeSantis slams critical race theory and says it will have no place in Florida classrooms. Not worth 1 red cent. Dangerous. Dangerous that this is now all over. And it's not just in public schools, charter schools, private schools, West Point, universities. How did it get here? How did it get this far? Because the American people have not stood up and taken responsibility. Because, yes, it is our responsibility to stand up for what is right. And when we don't do that, your country goes down. And we are going down, boy. So if you want to hear, about critical race theory, Christopher Rufo has done great investigation on the critical race theory in federal agencies, in schools. So this is a very good interview, and I will link below to this interview. But I want you to hear mainstream media and how they are presenting what Governor DeSantis did in Florida.
They're based on race. I want to do the opposite. I want to treat people as individuals. I want to treat people based on character. But when you put this curriculum in, it ends up creating more divisions. Let me be clear. There's no room in our classrooms for things like critical race theory. Teaching kids to hate their country and to hate each other is not worth 1 red cent of taxpayer money.
DeSantis said his long-term goal is to have high school seniors take a civics test within the next 2 years in order to graduate.
I'm sorry, I played that a little bit too late. Hang on. This is who mainstream media will put on mainstream media to counter what Governor DeSantis is doing, rejecting critical race theory.
Jennifer Shagru, a professor of educational leadership at Florida Gulf Coast University, says critical race theory does not teach hate.
It's teaching people how to understand and make better choices and treat everybody as equal under the law. Critical race theory posits that laws and policies are racially biased. Okay, they are grounded in racism.
She says getting rid of it in the classroom will not allow students to think critically about how our society functions.
My concern is that it doesn't allow them that opportunity to understand how to question impact and how it could be better crafted so that more people benefit or are treated equally under the law.
But Ladovic Kimball, a retired psychology professor and civil rights activist here in Southwest Florida, says in the wake of the social and racial injustice we saw in 2020, but also the current attack on Asian Americans, we need this type of education in the classroom.
So we need the education for people to understand what the problem is and how do we bring about change. If we don't do race-based education, then racism becomes even far worse in this country instead of better. We have to.
You know, it's interesting because we didn't have race-based, education, baby boomers, and then the generation after that. And we were progressing, not in that liberal progressive way. We were getting better and better, and racism was waning. Of course you're going to have individuals who are just racist, and they'll never work on it. But, first of all, this is not the way to combat racism. Racism is a disease within the individual, and they need to work it out. Government cannot eradicate racism. It exists within the individual. It's a sickness within the individual. It's a disease within the individual. And they need to do the work necessary to heal their sickness. All of this is simply to create more and more division. So, all right, so you have that woman talking about how, it doesn't promote hate. People have to understand how the laws work in a society. This is how? Really? And you're going to be teaching kindergartners? All right. I want you to listen to this.
Welcome back to Sovereign Nation. I'm Michelle Malkin. Dr. Gary Thompson is a doctor of clinical psychology, a father of 6 girls, and advisory board member of U.S. Parents in Education. Welcome, Dr. Thompson.
Hi, Michelle. How are you today?
Good. Well, this is an unpleasant topic, but you have so many trenchant things to say about critical race theory, race relations, and particularly how it's affecting our children in the schools. And I wanted to read something that's from the U.S. Parents in Education website about some of the summary of the CRT lessons being taught. Quote, racism is our country's original sin. Do not say all lives matter. That is racist. White fragility should be used to describe why white people can't talk about racism. Dr. Thompson, what is the goal? What is the end game for these people?
Well, first off, I don't call it critical race theory. I call it a critical race agenda because it has absolutely no peer-reviewed backing. The end result for all of this is for 250 million white Americans to take a knee, whip out their checkbooks for reparations, and to get in the back of the bus, and then to shut up and ask no questions.
It's devastating because this is something that I encountered in my liberal arts college back in the 1990s, and it has metastasized over the last 3, almost 4 decades now. And alarmingly, it has made its way into K through 12. And you are somebody who has expertise in early childhood learning. What is the psychological and mental and moral impact of this idea of imposing collective guilt on one group of innocent children at the expense of that group on behalf of another?
I can't see on any level how this critical race agenda clown show can be psychologically beneficial for children. Certainly not my children. I have 6 biracial daughters. I can't imagine telling them that half of them is systemically racist. You don't have to be a clinical psychologist to know the end game on that. It's not going to turn out well for children in public schools and even private schools now in America.
Yeah, that's actually a good point because it's not something that's simply endemic to government-run schools. And in fact, In my own experience as a parent who's had children in every form of education, private, public, charter, religious, and homeschooling, in fact, many of these private schools are at the forefront of ramming this down kids' throats. And even among charter schools, which are often touted as some sort of sanctuary, particularly for minority children, you've got mixed-race kids in one instance in Nevada, where a kid and his mom are suing because he was failed out of a class because he wouldn't admit his quote-unquote white dominance. Your thoughts?
Well, I have a Caucasian wife. She is the mother of my 6 children, and on no level can I even remotely think that I would ask her to take a knee because she is white dominant. This is divisive, this is destructive, and this is not good on any level psychologically for any white American in our country.
No, it's not. No, it is definitely not. And, you know, I know that this is long, but I'm going to play again Dr. Carol Swain.
The myth of white privilege in America. At the risk of sounding like a broken record, I'm going to talk to you once more about the issue of race in America. You know, that issue that just won't go away? Well, I'm Carol Swain, and this is Be the People TV. Although we have a black attorney general, a black president, and we have another person that's black that's been nominated to be attorney general, we still hear from Reverend Isle and elites at our colleges and universities that racism is as pervasive today as ever before, and that our criminal justice system is inherently racist. Perhaps the most persistent myth is the myth of white privilege. You know, the idea that there's something about having white skin that gives you special privileges in America? Well, you tell that to the single mom working at Waffle House and to the unemployed white men of Appalachia. We are told that there are far more whites in positions of power. Whites are incarcerated at lower rates than blacks. Whites aren't harassed by the police, and the list goes on and on. Ignored in those discussions are many facts that would explain those differences. Lately, black protesters have been demonstrating at brunch restaurants in New York City to protest so-called white spaces. Now, independently of the fact that it's foolish to invade other people's private property, what we don't hear from all these protesters is that it's education and strong families, not some sort of racial aristocratic privilege that determines one's level of success in life. We need only to look at Asian American families for evidence of what makes for success in America. Only 13% of Asian American children live in single-parent homes compared with 55% of black children. Unemployment is 11.4% for blacks and 4.5% for Asians. There's no escaping the fact that education and family structure play a huge role in the success and failure of racial and ethnic groups. It's time we stop the silly discussion about white privilege and instead devote ourselves to teaching others about the ingredients for success in America. I'm Carol Swain, and this is Be the People.
All right. You know, I know this is actually a subject near and dear to my heart, and I do not like what is going on. You know, I became an employment discrimination attorney because of an experience that I had decades and decades ago where, yeah, I did see systemic racism. But that systemic racism, I'll talk about that experience in a later video. But I can't stand that we're going backwards based on a lie. based on a lie. We were going forward based on the truth that the color of one's skin does not matter at all. What matters is the content of their character. And now they're making everything come down to the color of one's skin. So, we are going backwards. Americans have to stand strong and speak up, speak the truth of what's going on. You know, we have an awful lot of events taking place, and hardly anybody knows the truth of these events based on mainstream media spewing their lies and propaganda. A black student's account of campus racism went viral, ruined the lives of 4 staff, and led to forced race training. Her claims were false. Yeah, and I'm just going to read the headlines. University researcher: intelligence is a white man's mythology. Really? Okay. Oh, that comes down to whiteness, intelligence. Minnesota's new school studies curriculum would racialize first graders. Okay, I'm sorry, that's a repeat. Loyola University Maryland Business School dean condemns entrepreneurship and financial literacy for black youth as institutionalized racism. St. Joseph's professor placed on paid leave after criticizing reparations. You cannot have a different view. You cannot disagree. If you disagree, then you are canceled. That's where we're at, and that is a very communist strategy. Idaho lawmakers push to defund Boise State programs that push extremist ideologies. Good. Pushing back against these extremist ideologies. Extremist ideologies such as those tied to social justice, racism, Marxism, socialism, or communism. The university had planned a black graduation. Oh, well, graduation's for everybody, not a specific group. They're pushing us back so fast that now they're segregating once again. You know, the black militia group, they want their own country here in the United States. A lot of the programs, a lot of the agenda is segregating based on race. This, I believe, is unlawful, illegal. Here, Harvard grants 250 points of SAT privilege to African American and Hispanic students. Do you know how demeaning that is to African Americans and Hispanics? Harvard is giving you a 250-point lead just because of the color of your skin, black and brown. Oh, okay. Because Harvard doesn't believe that you have the intelligence. It's so demeaning what is taking place and how black Americans and Hispanics can't see this. It's pretty amazing. Cornell charges students $1,800 for a racially segregated rock climbing class. Wow. Frantically scrubs website when confronted. Arizona State University dean writes book alleging that grading students' writing is white supremacy. Okay. Theological school dean, white grievance and rage are baked into the DNA of America. Well, clearly it wasn't baked because of how far we came in this country. And now we go backwards. Okay, that's a repeat. Sorry, that's a repeat. Repeat. Student government blocks libertarian student group, citing hate speech, bigotry. They're racist. Libertarians. Because they're not Democrats and going along with the agenda. Whistleblower at Smith College resigns over racism. Jody Shaw made less in a year than the cost of tuition. Tuition now is over $80,000 at Smith College. She was offered a settlement but turned it down. Why? Because the settlement included a non-disclosure confidentiality agreement. Do not speak about what's happening at Smith College. If these people who are promoting this critical race crap and the racism, if they believed that they were doing the right thing, then they wouldn't have people sign confidentiality agreements. They would allow people to speak, but they don't, because they know that it's an agenda. And I'm going to post another video on Jody Shaw, what took place, and read this article by Barry Weiss. It's outrageous that people's lives are being destroyed because they're being forced to admit that they're racist, and they're not, so they can't say that. And voila, your career is destroyed. LA Teachers Union under fire for effort to racially classify critics. Oh my God. Purdue paid Robin DiAngelo $7,000 for virtual event discussing the racism and manipulation of white people. Okay. It's an industry, and people are making a fortune off of this. Gender studies professor blames capitalism, white supremacy, and patriarchy for deaths of shelter animals. Professors help push program that claims math is racist because it requires a right answer. The idiocy is astounding. Professors call for discussions of structural racism in psychiatry. Oh, there ain't no structural racism in psychiatry. They want everyone on drugs. University of Washington, nursing students now have their own anti-racism center. University Senate deems U.S. racist, United States racist, oppressive. Professor who fled communist country responds forcefully. Not just that professor, but another professor. But what happened? Not the professor that escaped communism, but the other professor. There's a petition to get rid of him. Michigan Technological University Senate. It's okay. They passed a resolution in December 2020 calling for the school to denounce and take action against white supremacy, anti-blackness, systemic racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, fat phobia, and other oppressive and intolerant behaviors within the university. So, the professor who escaped communism in Poland, who now teaches at that university, Jaroslaw Durek, I'm sorry for mispronouncing your name, but he publicly opposed the resolution, denounced it for pushing the leftist media narrative. Actually, he didn't, because it says at the end of the article that he wrote a private letter and it was leaked to the public. But, yeah, denounced it for pushing the leftist media narrative of systemic and anti-black racism. He lived under the communist regime in Poland, stating that he knows what systemic discrimination and oppression are, and while this country and this university have problems, systemic racism is not one of them. The other letter, written by Jeffrey Burrell, called the resolution itself racist, as he felt it unfairly maligned white people. Burrell also claimed that white men face discrimination in academia and went on to detail his experiences with it. Among examples of anti-blackness in American history, culture, institutions, and practices, the resolution cites police brutality. Okay. The disparity with which the current COVID-19 pandemic strikes communities of color, higher rates of arrests among blacks, and a lack of black representation in prestigious occupations. Well, there's an awful lot of black representation in prestigious occupations today. Police brutality, white people die more frequently by the police than black. Oh, but you can't say that because they don't care about facts. And they shoot you down and cancel you if you state the facts. So we're going to go on a lie. Everything is on a lie, based on a lie. That's the foundation of our country now, a lie. Specifics. No student should be able to earn an undergraduate degree without an education concerning the historical and current manifestation and operations of anti-blackness. Again, I will say it. There is no way in hell that so many black Americans could have achieved the success that they have achieved, and they're all over, and we get it, we see it every single day, mainstream media, on the internet, whole lot. No way could that have happened if the country was systemically racist. Was it decades and decades and decades ago? Yeah. And all of that was getting better. It was waning. And now they're bringing it right back. And this is going to hurt everyone. Everyone. Blacks, black Americans going along with this. It's going to destroy you too. Intolerant behaviors, including fat phobia. Okay. You know, he called the professor who escaped communism, called the resolution the most hateful and divisive document that has ever been produced by the Senate at Michigan Tech. He helped to liberate Poland from the communist injustice by participating in street protests and working under a resistance leader, praised the people of northern Michigan as being a loving and welcoming community. People aren't coming to America in droves because this is a racist country. They are coming because this country, with all its faults, is the fairest and freest place on earth. Well, that is waning. He concluded his letter by calling on members of the University Senate to leave your imaginary world of hate and explore the goodness and welcoming nature of our local towns and villages. And he also stated or denounced oppressive and intolerant behaviors, though he accused the resolution's authors of themselves perpetuating anti-blackness by implying that black people can't stand on their own feet and compete. It's so unbelievably demeaning. without special privileges and handouts from allegedly more virtuous and white people, you know, the privileged. I mean, it's... Law professor says he was forced to undergo lengthy mental examination and drug test after exam question caused students distress. Okay. I was an employment discrimination attorney, law professor in an employment discrimination class, and he included a redacted reference to a racial slur. A redacted, okay? N. But his hypothetical fact pattern in a mock employment discrimination case for his final exam, it referred to, do you understand? Now, this is an employment discrimination case. What happens in employment discrimination? You have black people who are called N. So that's a fact. And when you have that, and you can prove that, you've got a case. Because that is employment discrimination. But the slur shocked students. They're in an employment discrimination. Okay. Shocked students created a momentous distraction and caused unnecessary distress and anxiety for those taking the exam. What the hell are you doing in an employment discrimination class? I mean, the idiocy, the idiocy, the idiocy, the idiocy, the idiocy. I can't stand it. I really can't stand it. It's so sick. You know, the left does want to keep racism alive. They want us hating one another based on the color of our skin. This is all a deliberate agenda to bring this country down. And anyone who is of the baby boomers, of the Gen X's, we have to see how far, in a good way, this country came in terms of race. But who was it that said, give me one generation to indoctrinate, and this is paraphrased, but and I can take over that country? Stalin or Lenin. And that's exactly what's happening. And I can't stand that it's just a daily 24/7 race, everything, every infrastructure. That's right, the infrastructure, the $2 trillion bill. Yeah, we've got to correct the racism.
A good rule of thumb is if you are not a person of color and millions of people of color across this country is saying a thing or a person is racist, it's really not your place to say that it isn't.
You've heard about the black card, right? No, not the one from Visa or American Express. This one is much more valuable. There are entire organizations that have been built upon it and individuals that have used it to acquire both wealth and influence. If this sounds like something you might wish to own, you should know that there is only one way you can get your hands on it. You have to be born with black skin. That's the only requirement. Really. You can be poor, middle class, rich, it doesn't matter. The black card will still confer upon you an entire history of oppression, even if you've never been oppressed. Flash the black card and most white people will cower. Play the black card expertly and you can win awards, make millions, all the while claiming that the people who got you there somehow hate you. With a black card, you can sell books full of indecipherable prose, because with a card that powerful, who cares if your words make any sense? You can call yourself a civil rights leader and shake down multinational corporations, or you can torch your own neighborhood because you didn't like the outcome of a grand jury verdict. Ironically, the people you might think have the most legitimate claim to the black card refuse to use it. Take my grandfather, for instance. He raised me from the time I was 9 years old. Born in 1941 in rural North Carolina, he started working at age 5, laying out tobacco to dry on a sharecropping farm. Jim Crow, separate drinking fountains, and the KKK were ever-present realities. He was 17 when he married my grandmother. He made a living cleaning homes and office buildings until he saved up enough money to open his own cleaning business. The thing is, he never played any card, nor did my grandmother. If they had problems, they didn't blame anybody, they just fixed them. And they raised me to do the same. Chores were a requirement in their household. So was reading the Bible every morning before school. I didn't like the Bible readings and I hated the chores, but I realize now that these small acts of discipline, although sometimes stifling, had a strong, positive impact on my character. I was a first-generation college student. This was supposed to be the ticket to prosperity, but it wasn't. I left college with a mountain of debt and no practical skills. I had just $80 in my bank account and very few prospects. I could have given up. I could have dug deep into my history and declared myself a natural product of ancestral oppression. I could have played the black card and absolved myself of all responsibility for my own stupid decisions. Except I didn't, because it would have destroyed my grandfather's legacy. I am proud that he had the fortitude to turn nothing into something, and I have no intention of reversing that something back into a nothing. My attitude comes with a price, however, because if you are born black and you don't accept your natural status as a victim, then the validity of your blackness is immediately called into question. Well, so be it. If believing in myself, if accepting the responsibility for my failures somehow disqualifies me from owning an imaginary card, then let me be the first to declare that I don't want one. I also don't want Cornel West, Al Sharpton, or insert anyone else who uses their skin color to game the system as a role model. I already have my grandfather. If there is one thing that my family history has taught me, it's that I do not need a black card or an imaginary anything to make something of myself. For the record, my grandfather, now retired, lives in a home that he and my grandmother built on a plot of land they purchased in North Carolina, the very same sharecropping farm that he worked on as a small child. His story is unique. His story is beautiful because it's American. And that's the only card I've ever been interested in playing. I'm Candace Owens for Prager University.
Oh boy. Well, I wish it was the only card that everybody was interested in playing, but it's not. It's not. The bias of professionalism standards, that's right. It's a coded language for white favoritism in workplace. Wow. In white and Western standards of dress and hairstyle, straightened hair, suits, but not saris, and burqa and beard bans in some countries. In speech, accent, word choice, communication, never show emotion, must sound American, and must speak white standard English. In scrutiny, black employees are monitored more closely and face more penalties as a result, and in attitudes toward timeliness and work style, that's all white. Smithsonian Institution explains that rationality and hard work are racist. So friggin' demeaning to black and brown and all non-white races. Because you're not rational, you don't work hard, and you're exempt from it because it's racist. Kew Gardens tell visitors how racist its plants are. How racist its plants are. MSNBC host Joy Reid, white people in red states want black people to die from COVID. This is what we get from mainstream media. Do you think they have an agenda to get us to hate one another? To get us violent against one another? Whiteness is a pandemic. Oh, God. The companies who are boycotting or not donating the Georgia election law, mainstream media, CBS, deleted a tweet linking to their article that gave companies advice on fighting Georgia's restrictive new voting law. Do you think maybe mainstream media has an agenda? If anybody in this country could think, critically think, start to question what is going on, CBS is telling companies do not donate, spread awareness, and fight for the federal law that the Democrats want passed to control elections. And there's an awful lot of people who are coming out and saying this law that will give Democrats the control of elections, taking it away from the states, and the states constitutionally, they have the right to control the elections in their own state, taking it away from the states will turn this country into a one-party system, which it is already, but it will give Democrats free rein to continue to steal elections. And CBS is advocating for it. This is not what mainstream media should be doing. Guess how much money the official Black Lives Matter organization raked in last year? $90 million. And they rake in that kind of money from corporations like Coca-Cola that donate to Black Lives Matter. Wow. So corporations are really now involved in eradicating racism. And they're behind Black Lives Matter. Isn't that interesting? Coca-Cola confirms training. Employees try to be less white. Less white. T-Mobile is forcing employees to complete a white privilege checklist. Corporations, politicians, mainstream media, all in alignment, pushing an agenda that is destroying all of us. Amid backlash, Coca-Cola removed their diversity training, Be Less White seminar. They removed it from LinkedIn. Really? Huh. But you're so righteous, Coca-Cola. Why would you remove your diversity training, your Be Less White seminar? Why remove that if you think it's the right thing to do? Because you know it's the wrong thing to do. So when there's pushback, when there's backlash, that's when they just want to delete all evidence. Just like CBS. Racism over. Aunt Jemima is now Pearl Milling Company. You know, as a kid, I would stare at Aunt Jemima, and I thought she had such a warm, and I didn't articulate it this way, but I used to look at that picture of this woman, and I wanted her to be my mother. I'm white, by the way. I wanted her to be my mother because she looked so just warm and loving. Amazon Prime stops streaming Clarence Thomas documentary during Black History Month. Cigna, critical race theory training. Don't say brown bag lunch. Oh my God. The lunacy in it all. Mindful of religious privilege. Good news, guys. For only $444, you can start breaking the addiction of privilege with a 3-hour online course. Yes, you're on your anti-racism journey, but shame of getting it wrong keeps you leaning back into your comfort. There are so many trainings, people on it making a fortune. And white people are actually doing this. I am white, therefore a racist, declares liberal professor in latest proof U.S. academics are fueling racial tensions. And a lot of this is coming from universities. And parents, you should be really pissed off that you're spending money on this crap. Yeah. Well, you know, I am so, I don't even know what to do with this country anymore. You know, there's something very wrong with it. Something very wrong with it. 10 examples that prove white privilege exists in every aspect imaginable. I have the privilege of having a positive relationship with the police, generally speaking. Oh, really? I know a lot of white people who don't have that privilege. A lot of white guys. I have the privilege of being favored by school authorities. Well, I didn't feel that when I was in school. And that was when we were in worse shape in terms of the racism than we, well, actually are today, because everything that you're hearing about this racism in America is false. I have the privilege of attending segregated schools of affluence. Wow. Now I know a whole lot of white people who did not have that privilege, and a whole lot of white parents who can't give their kids that privilege. I have the privilege of learning about my race in school. Oh, really? I don't remember that. I have the privilege of finding children's books that overwhelmingly represent my race. I have the privilege of soaking in media blatantly biased toward my race. Well, surely nobody white can say that today. I have the privilege of escaping violent stereotypes associated with my race. Well, look, I was actually going to go into race relations. I did not understand why people would look at race color and then make all these presumptions. And this was when I was very young. And, you know, I know that a whole lot of my adult, former liberal progressive friends, they every now and then showed their racism while they were always voting Democrat because they weren't. Now, they were kind of like neutral racists. But it was in them. They had to work out that stuff on their own. And I did call them out on it. But, again, you know, this kind of mentality was not my mentality. I know a lot of people will say, oh, you're just full of shit and all this. No, I'm actually not. And I hate it. I really hate it. But now it's so being used, you know. Look at the people who are the Black Lives Matter. Most of them are white, screaming at another white person that they're racist. It's all deliberate, and that's all people need to do is a little bit of research to find out who's behind Black Lives Matter. Who funds it? Critical race theory is a theory, not fact. And they're pushing it. K through 12. Indoctrination centers. That's what public schools are. That's what a whole lot of schools are. Indoctrination centers. Indoctrinating them in a way that, you know, benefits the left, benefits those who are destroying our country, benefits those who want to bring in communism. I have the privilege of being insulated from the daily toll of racism. I have the privilege of living ignorant of the dire strait of racism today. See, none of this is true for today because it's an everyday dose of how white people are racist, and we've got to confront that racism in this country. It's systemically racist. My God, so many, you know, successful Black Americans, but hey, we are systemically racist. It's unbelievable. You know, remove Shakespeare, white supremacy. Just remove everything. The left will never debate. The left will never debate. This is Christopher Rufo, who I told you earlier about his interview on American Thought channel, and you ask for debate and they won't do it because they know they will lose. The left has denounced the war on woke, but it is afraid to defend the principles of critical race theory in public debate because it can't, because there's no defense of this critical race theory. It's not based on fact and it's not based on truth. So they won't debate it. If they think this is the right thing to do, if it was based on truth and fact, they would debate it because They would have substance to debate it with. They don't, so they won't. Americans need to wake up. Americans need to band together regardless of race. Americans need to see that we are all being destroyed. We are all being destroyed. All of us. Regardless of race. So, do we need to stop letting these politicians, corporations, mainstream media manipulate us to hate one another? Are we really that shallow? Can we stop being manipulated by them? Can we look at one another, respect one another, come together as Americans? That's what I would like to see. I'm not putting all of the links down. You know, the everyday consequences of critical race theory and cancel culture. We have a kind of a society-wide problem where moving away from equality towards equity, moving away from justice towards social justice, we're creating a system of policy and practice that is antithetical to our Constitution, antithetical to the Bill of Rights, antithetical to American law. The idea on the top line is just social justice. But really, if you kind of peel back the layers of ideology and you get to the core of this belief system, they're advocating for a kind of cultural revolution steeped in Marxism, adjusted to identity politics, and now activated through Black Lives Matter, through critical race theory, and absurdly through even corporate HR departments. This ideological permeation of American institutions is spurring a dangerous cancel culture movement. You can't disagree. If you disagree, you get canceled. That is a communist tactic. And we're living communism already. It's cementing itself every single day. People feel more able to speak freely or freely speak their mind in China than they do in San Francisco. And it's not because we have a kind of repressive censorship state like the Chinese Communist Party operates, although we seem to be kind of slightly edging in that direct general direction. It's because we have a kind of culture of self-censorship and a kind of a wall of fear that is maintained by the kind of arbiters of cancel culture in order to shut up the opposition. Now I'm reading, a transcript of what Christopher Rufo was saying here. It's Marxism. Americans, in a Marxist society, you're not free. So we are literally allowing people to destroy our freedom, and that's everybody's freedom. Black, brown, red, white, whatever color you are, whatever that skin color, all Americans. So it's time to stand up, you think? Every parent needs to push back on this critical race theory. All parents need to stand together. We all need to push back on mainstream media lies. If we don't do that, we're killing off our own heart, our own soul, and our own minds. We're destroying ourselves every single time we do nothing.